I can't remember the last time I was excited to see a movie as much as I was with The Dark Knight Rises. Now, anybody who knows me knows that Batman is one of my favourite comic book characters, and not only that, one of my favourite characters in any sort of fiction. And I really, really liked Batman Begins, although The Dark Knight blew me away. I absolutely love that movie. I never actually reviewed it for YouTube because, quite frankly, I didn't know what to say about it. I was so in awe of that movie. The video would be me basically sitting here and having a wank on camera, which nobody wants. But The Dark Knight Rises, I went in with so high expectations. I thought it can't possibly meet them. What I'm expecting, it can't be done, basically. The film is the third and final instalment in Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy. It takes place 7-8 years after The Dark Knight and picks up where Bruce Wayne has basically hung up the cowl as Batman and has become an eccentric recluse. And in his absence, characters such as Bane and Catwoman have had the opportunity to hatch evil plans and do, you know, evil deeds and all the rest of it. Now, the film itself, I don't want to go into plot specifics because, first of all, I don't want to ruin it for anyone, but I imagine anybody watching this video has already seen it by now. And secondly, the Lucha Median Geek and I actually went to see it together, and we want to do a film discussion series all about the Dark Knight Trilogy. So I don't want to go into too specific details, but going in, I have to say this. The opening scene, which involves a plane hijacking, is one of the most awe-inspiring action spectacles I think I've ever seen in all my life. After that, you have about an hour of not only exposition, but building character, context, starting to weave the web of storylines. I've heard a few complaints that people don't like the first hour because it's slow in pace, or rather slower than we're used to from Christopher Nolan's Batman movies. I actually really enjoyed this first hour. I felt like what I wanted going in was a Bruce Wayne movie rather than a Batman movie. I thought, I want to see more of Bruce Wayne because he was kind of sidelined in The Dark Knight because of the Joker, and I'd like to see them focus on Bruce Wayne's character. And they do that. They go down the road of basically, Batman has always been the world's greatest detective, and they kind of go into that, and the first hour is a lot of Bruce Wayne figuring stuff out, and also, you know, it establishes Catwoman's role in in Gotham, etc., and in the movie. After the first hour, you then get a lot of Bane's character played amazingly by Tom Hardy. Now, what I want to say about Bane is, after the Joker, which, let's face it, is one of the greatest on-screen villains probably ever committed to film, Heath Ledger transcended the role, and really, if he hadn't have sadly passed away, that would have propelled him to megastardom. Now, I always thought, like, no matter what they do after the Joker, it won't match Heath Ledger in terms of the audacity or the complexity of that performance. But I have to say, Tom Hardy, who some of you may know from Inception or Bronson, is a fantastic film. He really manages to not only impress almost just as much as Heath Ledger did, but he basically takes the role of Bane, which the only time we've really seen him on screen before was in Joel Schumacher's abysmal Batman and Robin, and make him a credible villain. Bane is frightening. Bane makes this movie almost into a horror film. It's hard to explain. Bane is a monster. He's a highly intelligent, articulate monster. He will destroy anything that's in his path, and Tom Hardy plays him with such menace. Especially, I think a lot of this comes from the mask that he wears and the fact that Tom Hardy is unbelievably good at acting with his eyes. And this is another thing, a lot of people have kind of complained about the mask making it difficult to tell what he's saying, but I didn't really have that problem. There were a couple of moments where I thought, you know what, and then I had to kind of deduce what he'd said. But for the most part, I thought it worked, and the fact that they've kind of amped up the volume on Tom Hardy's voice to the point where it almost sounds like his voice is playing over the film, and it's actually separate and non-diegetic sound. I think this adds a kind of unease and a threat to every scene that he's in, and I found it to be really, really effective. So Bane is just as good a villain character as the Joker, in my opinion, and I was really blown away. Anne Hathaway as Catwoman, another great addition. Now, Catwoman was what really worried me about this movie. I thought, like, I can't see how you can do Catwoman and make it a good character, because although I like Michelle Pfeiffer in Batman Returns, and I know that these are nothing to do with each other, but Catwoman's not, I'm not that mad about her character, but I thought Anne Hathaway was really brilliant. She brought a certain kind of allure and an inherent sexiness to the role, but she managed to remain grounded and felt very much an organic part of Nolan's universe, very much a character that could progress and flourish in the 7 years that Batman has been absent from Gotham. So again, Anne Hathaway was like the surprise of the movie. I thought she did really well. Christian Bale himself is nothing short of fantastic. I mean, people forget, you know, that Christian Bale is probably one of the greatest actors of his generation. And I know that when people think about Christian Bale, they think about the Terminator 4 tirade. But honestly, watch American Psycho, watch Batman Begins. This guy is such a fantastic actor. And he really gets the opportunity to shine in this movie. As I mentioned earlier, I felt a bit like he got sidelined in The Dark Knight, but he shines in this. And really has to go through quite a large arc over the course of the 3-hour movie. Now, this is another complaint I've heard, is that people feel like Bruce Wayne goes through this same arc twice in this. He goes from, you know, kind of reclusive, battered and injured to Batman, and then he's horribly injured again by Bane, and anybody who's read the comics will have half expected this going in. And he has to kind of recuperate again and fight back. And people have said, like, why does he go through the same character arc twice? But I kind of like this. It goes to show that this character can't just put the suit back on and go back to normal. After 7 years, he's not the same guy that he was in The Dark Knight. You know, he doesn't have the ability to fight as well as he did, and I quite like the fact that as soon as he gets the suit back on, Bane basically just wipes the floor with him, and I found that to be really quite interesting. That brings me on to another part of the film I really enjoyed, was the fighting between the characters, the hand-to-hand combat. I thought it was brilliant because, unlike most action movies, the hand-to-hand combat in this movie really kind of went a ways to explaining different characters' state of minds. The way that Bruce Wayne fights Bane the first time round is so much different to the second time round, and I thought the fight scenes were really quite revealing when it came to the character stuff. So I like the fact that Nolan managed to not only shoot the fight scenes with aplomb, and he does shoot them really well, keeps the camera kind of held back, you get to see everything that's happening, but he also makes them quite unique to the characters. So I thought that was very, very impressive. The more impressive aspects of the story and the narrative is that the final act of this film, the final hour, if you will, is essentially a post-apocalyptic war horror movie. And while that sounds like, you know, quite a random assertion, I really enjoyed the movie. The fact that it is a spectacle. It's probably the biggest film I've ever seen in terms of having extras on screen and practical effects and action scenes. It's huge. It's a big movie, and with it being 3 hours long, if anything, when I left the movie, I thought like that could have had half an hour added to it to flesh out some of the storylines, and it wouldn't have been a detriment. It would only have been a good thing. So I felt like, if anything, the film is a little overstuffed. Now, when you compare this to The Dark Knight, I found, and I know this isn't everybody's opinion, but I found with The Dark Knight that all the different storylines that they were dealing with did intertwine very successfully, and I was impressed with how they managed to tell Two-Face's story against the Joker's, and how it all balanced out and everybody was given screen time, and I thought it was a perfect kind of mixture of characters and storylines, whereas in this film, I do feel like they overreach their grasp in terms of the narrative. It feels like there's chunks missing at times, and some plot holes, some massive plot holes that you could drive a plane through, arise because it feels like scenes have been cut. Now, while I understand why this will have happened, you know, it clocks in at, I think, just under 3 hours. So it's clear that Warner Brothers have probably said to Christopher Nolan, look, you need to bring it in at less than 3 hours. It is a summer blockbuster after all. So I can kind of understand why they've had to cut stuff. And I know that Christopher Nolan has probably cut stuff that he feels he can lose and give the audience the benefit of the doubt and think, well, if they're wondering how this character did this, they can probably figure it out for themselves, so I can afford to lose this scene. It certainly feels like maybe there's a longer cut of the movie floating around out there, and I know that Christopher Nolan doesn't really do director's cuts, so we'll probably never see that longer version, which is a shame, because I feel like I said earlier that you could add half an hour to this movie and it would improve it, certainly. I felt like, even though the film is a little bit overstuffed, it is probably the most rewarding blockbuster you'll see this year. And it's a very relevant blockbuster as well. It's certainly a blockbuster aimed at an audience who have just, you know, coming out the other side of 2 recessions. Whether or not it is the message that it's giving is capitalist propaganda, I haven't decided on that yet. I'm actually going to go see it again tomorrow, and maybe it'll help clear that up. But I certainly did feel at times like the film was very much in favour of the 1%. Now, whether or not that's the case, or rather Christopher Nolan's point or theme or point that he had to make, was that, you know, you may think revolution is a good idea, but, you know, look at where it leads. I haven't decided yet, but like I say, it's a film that apparently, because I've only seen it once, apparently it holds up to repeat viewings, and you do get more from it the more you watch it, so we'll see about that aspect of it. Other aspects, Michael Caine, brilliant as Alfred, shares a couple of very emotional scenes with Christian Bale that actually brought me to tears, and I'm not ashamed to admit that. These are characters that I've grown up with. I've read the comics, watched the cartoons, watched all the movies, the TV show. To see these characters, you know, bare their souls to each other, was quite emotional. The ending as well, I feel like they kind of compromised on a gut punch ending, but again, they won't have had any choice. It's a kids' movie, it's a tentpole summer blockbuster, there's only so dark they can make it. Speaking of the darkness, this film should not be a 12A, it should be a 15, and while ratings are something that I don't necessarily agree with, this is not suitable for young children. So if you haven't seen it yet, and for whatever reason you're thinking that based on this review you're going to decide whether or not to take your kids, don't take a kid younger than 12 to see this, because it'll scare the daylights out of them. The film is very, very, very dark, about as dark as you could possibly make a 12A or a PG-13 over in the States. And it's all the better for it. So all in all, The Dark Knight Rises, is it the best film of the year? Possibly. I haven't decided yet. Is it a rewarding blockbuster that far exceeds any blockbuster that you've seen in a long time? Yes, it is. Whereas Prometheus, which is maybe its main rival this year, was very hit and miss. The Dark Knight Rises rather, is largely a hit. It's fairly amazing in terms of how audacious a project it is, and you can't help but kind of sit in awe of it and really appreciate it on that level. Will you like it as much as The Dark Knight? Now, people I've seen it with have said that it's their favourite of the trilogy. Again, I haven't decided yet. I need to see it several more times before I can make a decision like that. But I would highly recommend it. It is fairly incredible. I'm trying to give a fair and balanced review, but I absolutely loved this movie. And obviously, all our hearts go out to the victims in Colorado of James Holmes, who stormed a cinema screening of the Dark Knight Rises and killed 12 people. That actually was going through my mind a lot while watching this movie. It was reported on the morning that I went to see it. And obviously it is a heartbreaking thing to have happen. And it's a shame that this film will probably always be associated with that tragedy. But yeah, that was horrible. But yeah, our hearts go out to those people, all the victims. It's a real shame. But the film itself, it's incredible. Go and watch it, you'll love it.